Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Straight Shift Winter Storm Edition. So, let me set the scene. I am recording in my studio in the middle of the second winter storm in a row here in the Carolinas. Last weekend, we got nothing but ice, but this weekend, we have actual snow. And I'm talking 12 inches of snow in many places. It's absolutely beautiful. Those of you from up north, you're like, yeah, what's the big deal? 12 inches of snow. We get that all the time. It's a very rare occurrence down here. The last time we had a big true snowstorm was, I think, 12 years ago. So it's special to us. And even though I grew up in Ohio and Wisconsin, and I am no stranger to snow, because it's so rare here, it's still a magical occurrence. It can also be problematic, but right now the roads are quiet, everything is closed. Granted, the grocery stores probably look like people were preparing for the apocalypse because all the shelves were bare, but it's just so lovely and magical. And honestly, the timing couldn't be more perfect because I wanted to cover this topic because it's a pattern that I see over and over again with a lot of my clients. When they fill out their perfect car questionnaire to work with me, a lot of people check the box that says, I must have all wheel drive. Like, emphatically, non negotiable, end of discussion. They have to have all wheel drive. I'm like, okay, that's cool. And then I read the rest of the questionnaire, and it usually says that their driving is their daily commute around the Charlotte area, or they're just running errands, taking the kids to school, maybe a road trip once a year to the beach. Maybe they go up to Raleigh, which is 3 hours away, entirely on the highway, still in the South. So I think, why do you think you need all wheel drive? And I'm not being snarky when I ask them that. I'm genuinely curious and I'm challenging them. Are you sure you really need all wheel drive? And most people don't know how to answer that question. They're like, well, I think it's safer. Or once every 5 years, we drive up north. Or, oh, well, we occasionally get snow in Charlotte. Yeah, occasionally, like every dozen years. A lot of people are paying for something that they may not actually need because they don't understand what all-wheel drive is and what it's good for and what it's not good for, when you need it and when really you don't. And so they're paying extra for something that they probably don't actually need for their lifestyle. So that is what today's episode is going to be about. It's not an anti all-wheel drive rant. I'm a big fan of all-wheel drive for the right purposes. This is more of a reality check and one of those semi-technical educational podcasts, but don't worry, I won't get too nerdy. Winter storms just have a way of turning mild preferences into full-blown panic, and I want to make sure people understand what the different drivetrains are, what they mean, and what they can and cannot do. So let's get into it. Before we go any further, let me just address something that pops up anytime we get any sort of winter storm here in the South. I know all you Northerners and Midwesterners, having been one myself, love giving everybody in the South crap because, oh my God, we got an inch of snow and it brings the entire city to a screeching halt. And honestly, fair point, but it's because we do not have the equipment and the infrastructure. We don't even have the tires to be able to handle it. And we usually get just ice, and that doesn't do anybody any good. But we don't have the salt trucks. We don't have winter tires. Most of our cars are running at best an all-season tire. And people here, unless they have grown up north like me, they just don't have the training and the experience to drive in that type of weather. Hence, why there's a lot of confusion over all-wheel drive. So to explain what all-wheel drive is good for and what it's not, we need to take a step back and look at all of the different drivetrains so that you understand the difference. I'm going to start with rear-wheel drive because that's becoming less common on cars today, but it's important to understand how that behaves because it will make front-wheel drive and all-wheel drive and four-wheel drive make a lot more sense. In rear-wheel drive, which is what vehicles used to be and what sportier vehicles still are, and even your big trucks and SUVs still have a base of rear-wheel drive. And that simply means that the rear wheels are in charge of propelling the car. forward usually, occasionally backwards when you need to back up, but the rear wheels drive the car. The front wheels steer, but there's a little division of labor there. Now, what happens when you get into low traction situations like snow, definitely ice, even heavy rain, that matters. Because when your rear wheels lose grip because they are trying to propel the car forward on a slippery surface, the back end of your car starts sliding. You, as the driver, don't feel that right away. The car's already rotating, usually before you realize it, and next thing you know, you are ass backwards spinning off into the tulips, or in this case, into the snow ditch. That is why rear-wheel drive can be a lot sketchier in winter. It's not evil, it just demands faster reaction times and a lot more skill. Modern traction control helps a bit, but it can't rewrite physics. Now, I grew up a long time ago in the north, and so I learned how to drive on rear-wheel drive in the snow. Let me tell you, you learn car control very quickly when you have to get to school in the morning and all there is rear-wheel drive. But it also helps you to learn where the limits of traction are and how your car handles at nice low speeds, because you can lose traction at 7 miles an hour. So it's a great, safer way to learn those skills. Hence why my father took me out to the big snow-covered parking lots after skating practice every day so that we could play and learn. Because he said, this is going to happen anyway. You might as well learn to do it on purpose so that you learn that control. You learn how the car feels and then how to control those slides. Little did he know that he would be turning me into the race car driver that I am today, but it was a lot of fun. But I learned a lot. We didn't have all-wheel drive back then. We were starting to get front-wheel drive, which is what my mother's station wagon was, which is why she always wanted me to drive the station wagon because it was so much safer, but so much less fun. But front-wheel drive is become the default for most cars these days. In a front-wheel drive car, it does what it says. The front wheels are propelling the car in addition to steering. So they've got a lot more work to do. They're carrying a lot of the vehicle's weight. But here's the key safety difference. When those front wheels lose traction, when they're trying to propel the car forward, you feel it immediately. And the car just starts to get a little bit loose, a little bit light, but the back end doesn't start to come around right away. That happens when the rear tires lose traction. But when those front wheels start to slip, you feel it, and it's a heck of a lot easier to correct. Give it a little throttle, you just kind of point it in the direction you want it to go, and hopefully the car settles back down, depending on the surface that you have lost traction upon. That early feedback is key. It gives you a lot more time to react, and it's a little more forgiving in bad driving conditions. Rear-wheel drive, not remotely forgiving. And this is where people don't like hearing that all-wheel drive is not that much different. All-wheel drive means what it says. All four wheels propel the car forward, which means that they can help you get moving if you are stuck. Hopefully, at least one of those tires can find some level of traction, and it can pull the rest of the vehicle along and get you moving until the other wheels start to get some traction, and now you can move forward. It also helps you continue to move forward on snow, semi-slippery surfaces, because today the all-wheel drive systems are what they call intelligent, because intelligent all-wheel drive is a great marketing term. But all that really means is that there are computers that are calculating what level of traction each tire has. Therefore, I'm going to give the most power to the wheel that has the tire with the most traction, because that's the one that's going to be able to get us out of this problem. You can think of it like an office. You've got 4 team members, and they're all supposed to be pulling around the same amount of weight, right? And they have a supervisor. That supervisor is the car's computer. And the computer is keeping an eye on everybody, making sure they're doing the work, seeing if there are any problems that they need to fix. If a couple of tires suddenly don't have traction, they raise their hand and go, help, help, I can't do my job. And the supervisor says, okay, who has traction? Oh, okay, you have great traction. You have some traction. Let me distribute the workload to you and you can get us going. And then once the other team members get some traction, then we can redistribute the workload and everybody can go back to pulling their own weight. That is what all-wheel drive is great for. What it does not help you do is stop. Doesn't help you brake, doesn't help you stop faster. It does nothing at all to improve deceleration on slippery roads. All-wheel drive helps acceleration and momentum, but it doesn't do you a dang bit of good if you were trying to stop on a slippery surface. All vehicles, no matter what kind of powertrain they have brakes on all four wheels. So all four wheels are trying to brake. Now, they may be intelligent enough to distribute the braking to different wheels under these conditions, but that's not all-wheel drive. That's traction control. But those are things that get you out of trouble. So a front-wheel drive vehicle can be just as effective and just as safe as an all-wheel drive vehicle, depending on what conditions are causing the low traction. If the low traction is being caused by worn out tires that don't have enough tread to move whatever the slippery thing is out of your way, whether that's water, frozen water, semi-frozen water, it's not going to do you a bit of good anyway. You're not going to be able to stop. So when we have ice storms here in the South, which is what we usually get, people think, I'll be fine, I've got all-wheel drive. Nope, they are just sliding just as beautifully as everybody else. Maybe they'll slide a little more diagonally or a little more sideways versus getting that good whipping spin out that rear-wheel drive has. But either way, they're not really going anywhere. So if the roads are icy, just stay home. That's why you stocked up on the milk and the bread and hopefully the adult beverages. Just stay home. This weekend, we got actual snow. It's the light, fluffy stuff. And I'm talking like fluffy enough that it's actually difficult to make a good snowball. Not that I didn't try. But the light, fluffy stuff gives your tires something to have traction on. They give that tread something to channel and move out of the way so that you can propel yourself forward. However, the tires that we have here in the South are not really designed to do that. That is why people who live in places that have an actual winter with lots of snow, they tend to change out their tires to winter tires or snow tires that are designed not only with a tread that moves all that snow out of the way to propel them forward, but also the rubber is made of a different compound that tolerates the colder temperatures better. Rubber doesn't really like to be cold, so they have to make it differently to be able to handle regular cold temperatures. I found out that the hard way when I went to VIR, the racetrack in Virginia, for an event. I had my nice normal track tires, which are a very soft tire that likes to be nice and toasty warm to give you great traction. And we had unseasonably cold weather that weekend, and it was about 34 degrees. And I was basically driving on plastic Tonka tires. I had no grip whatsoever because the rubber was like, whoa, who said it was going to be cold? This is not what we're designed for. So I should have just put the regular all-season tires on it and had a better day, but I didn't. So it's not just the tread, but when you're talking about snow, that is the most important thing. So we don't have that down here. If you're lucky, you have a good all-season tire and they're pretty new and you've got some traction. And if it's snowing out and you didn't grow up completely in the South, you've driven on snow before, it's not horrible. You just have to go a lot slower. You have to know how to control the car when you do start to slip and how you start to slip. You need to remember that going uphill is a lot harder than going downhill. But going downhill, you need to be sure that you can actually stop when you get to that stop sign that they always put at the bottom of the hill. So a lot of it is driver skill. Like I said, growing up, we didn't have fancy all-wheel drive, but it made everything a lot of fun. So, of course, yesterday, when we had all this beautiful snow. We literally got about 12 inches in about 10 hours, which is amazing for Charlotte. So the first thing my husband and I did was like, oh, where's the nearest giant open parking lot that we can go play? Because that's what we do. So the giant open parking lots are getting harder and harder to find. So we found one that was reasonably large and fairly open. You just have to watch out for the islands. This didn't have light poles, but it did have islands with trees, and it's difficult to see where the curbs are when there's that much snow. But we went over there anyway. The problem is my car, Maggie, my little Mini, she's fun in the snow. She's front wheel drive, so not as fun as rear wheel drive, but, Mini. She's not running right now, still, because I have not ordered the 4 billion parts that she needs. So I have my mother's 2003 base model Toyota Corolla. You can have fun in anything, right? So we went over there in the Corolla and still managed to have some fun. We did drop the front tire pressures quite a bit, and that's something a lot of people don't necessarily know to do to give themselves more traction, is you drop your tires. We dropped down to, I think, maybe 20 PSI from near 40 PSI. So basically we cut it in half, and that makes the tire a lot softer, which also puts more of it on the surface. It gives you a larger contact patch, and it was able to move things. So we had a good time, and I shot a really short YouTube video on it, and I will put a link to that in the description because I have to have fun in the snow, and I have to share it with you guys. Now back to the different drivetrains. Like I said, we never had all-wheel drive when I was growing up, and I grew up in Cleveland on the east side, which is extremely snowy, but we were fine. We also knew how to adapt. When I was a toddler, we had this giant green wood grain, ugly as you know what, Ford Country Squire station wagon. And that land yacht was rear wheel drive. So we had two things that we had to do in the winter, because in those old cars, they were long, they were big, that big heavy engine was all up front, yet the rear wheels were trying to propel the car with no weight over them. So yeah, not the best snow machines. So we did two things. We would put 25 to 50 pound bags of cat litter in the back. One, it helped weight down the car. But two, if we got stuck on some ice where we couldn't get some traction, you go and you get some of that kitty litter and you pour it underneath the tire on the slippery area. And then that gave the tire something to grab onto so that you could hopefully rock out of the little rut that you were stuck in. And kitty litter is better for that than salt, because cat litter doesn't damage your car like salt does. And it's also usually cheaper, and we had it anyway, so it didn't matter. The other thing we did was we added additional weight to the back of the car by carrying the Newfoundland around with us every time we went out. And he loved it. His name was Bambi, and he loved riding in the car. So we would just get him back there, and there's another 140, 150 pounds over the drive wheels. As long as we could get him to stay back there, because he did like to try and move up front and get into the back seat and like lean over the driver's shoulder and drool down the side of their neck while they were driving, but he was usually pretty good and we could keep him in the back. These are the things that we did growing up without all-wheel drive. The other thing that you need to understand is the concept of a differential. And most all-wheel drive cars today use open differentials. And this is going to be important when I start explaining the difference between all-wheel drive and four-wheel drive. Without getting into exactly what a differential is and how it is built, the purpose of it is to send power to the wheels. And an open diff is lazy. It sends the power to the wheel with the least resistance because it's easy. So that's why in the snow and ice, that one wheel will spin and everybody else does absolutely nothing. We call it the one-wheel peel. I have that problem in Maggie. She has an open diff. Lots and lots of vehicles do, and it doesn't drive you crazy until you were trying to get traction with that one drive wheel, and it's just going, it's really annoying. Diff's not broken. It's doing exactly what it's designed to do. And why I'm going to put a limited slip in Maggie. But this is where people get confused about all-wheel drive versus four-wheel drive. Four-wheel drive is something that we have had for a lot longer than all-wheel drive, and we associate it with trucks, pickup trucks. That's what used to be the only thing that had four-wheel drive. And then the big Suburbans and Expeditions that are based on the pickup trucks, they have part-time four-wheel drive, which means that it's rear-wheel drive all the time, unless you push a magic button and it locks in four-wheel drive. All-wheel drive systems, on the other hand, they rely on clutches and that brake-based traction control I mentioned earlier. They're reactive, but they're also designed to drive on the roads. They're really not heavy off-road focused. This is why all-wheel drive struggles in the sand. I had a client who did a lot of regular driving on beaches up in the Northeast, and all-wheel drive was not going to work. Sand is in many ways so much worse than snow, especially very fine sand. It requires momentum. The all-wheel drive system just basically panics and it cuts powers and applies the brakes and just kind of digs you in deeper. So we had to make sure that we got him a vehicle with true 4x4, four-wheel drive with a locking differential and a low mode in order to be able to handle that sand without getting stuck. If you really want to see some great examples of that, there's a YouTube channel that my husband absolutely loves, and I watch it with him sometimes because it's highly entertaining, good family entertainment. It's called Matt's Off-Road Recovery. It's a really popular YouTube channel. He lives out in Utah, and his whole business is getting people unstuck from stupid places that they probably should not have been trying to go in the vehicle that they had. And one of those is sand, because they have the salt lakes and everybody gets into that sand and silt and they all get stuck and he has to do these crazy things to get them out. It's very entertaining. He's always kind of shaking his head at the people in their all-wheel drive rental cars thinking that they can go out on this stuff and not get stuck. And they do every single time. It's made him a mint. That's why true four-wheel drive gives you a lot more advantage, because it gives you more control. I had a true four-wheel drive car when I lived in Ohio for the first couple of years of my adult life, and I had to use it some days to get out of snow drifts because I had to park on the street, and they'd come through at night and they would plow the road and I would get completely plowed in. So I would have to get in on the passenger side, crawl over, put it in four low, and literally plow myself out. And then I could either turn that off or I could put it in for high if I knew I was going to be driving on very snowy roads in order to get to work. But down here in the South, this only happens once every 10 to 15 years. And so the all-wheel drive isn't as helpful. It is helpful in the rain. It will help you to get a little bit more traction in heavy rain. That's why all-wheel drive is very popular in places like Seattle, where they get a ton of rain, not as much snow. But you really have to think about the trade-offs. Do you really need it if you live in a place that doesn't have regular snow? And I say snow, not ice, because they are a little bit more expensive. The insurance on them tends to be a little bit more expensive. You have slightly higher maintenance costs. You have tire costs because with these intelligent all-wheel drive systems, remember that supervisor I talked about that's distributing work? It relies on all four of those tires essentially being the same. They have to have the same tread pattern. So they absolutely have to be the same make and model tire. But they also need to have the same tread depth in order for that system to work correctly, because most of them don't take into account differences in tread depth. So you're not going to get the same performance, and it's just not going to be as safe to drive. So what that means is if you blow one tire, run over a pothole, a big nail or whatever, and you have to replace one tire, guess what? You're very often replacing all four tires instead of just the two from that axle. All-wheel drive vehicles are also a little bit harder to find down here in the South because they send them up north in places where they're actually more needed. So front-wheel drive is way more common down here. And for the vast majority of people in the South, front-wheel drive is perfectly fine. In fact, most of you will never even know the difference when you're just driving around town doing the normal things that you do with your life. Next time you go to look for a car, think about, do I really need all-wheel drive? Do I really understand what that means? And is it going to be something that I need for my lifestyle? Or, maybe, yeah, it's great because we drive up north every couple of years to have Christmas with the family up there. Guess what? You can rent cars. There's a lot of vehicles out there that aren't made in all-wheel drive. The Honda Odyssey, that's front-wheel drive. It does just fine up north in the snow. Don't think that all-wheel drive means that you can drive in any conditions, that it automatically means that you're going to be safe. And don't think that you absolutely have to have it necessarily, depending on where you live and what you do. So buy the drivetrain for your real life, for that 90% of your life, knowing that that other 10%, or in the case of snow in Charlotte, the half of 1% every 12 years, you can just stay home. Or you can rent something. Or you can just learn to drive in the snow. It's a lot of fun. But I hope that that's helpful in understanding the difference in the drivetrains and what they do and how they differ from each other, so that you can make a better decision the next time you're faced with, well, should I get front-wheel drive or should I get all-wheel drive? Whatever drivetrain you have in your car, and whatever the weather outside your door, please drive safely. I'm out of here.